What is going on, everyone? My name is Jonathan, host here at the Venue RX podcast, and I am extremely delighted to be joined today by Jordan Kentris. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan.
Well, you have done a couple incredible things, and
Don't stop.
most recently, you have been nominated as one of the most innovative people from BizBash in 2020, correct?
Yeah, it was amazing. Surprised, grateful. It was awesome.
Totally. So how did that come about, and what tell us a little bit about that?
I saw they were putting it out there, and I was working with my publicist team about, do we think that there's a chance here? Because my background's in stationery, but I've actually been in advertising for the past 14 years doing user experience design. And I've wanted to marry the two worlds together, so to speak. And I've been dragging my feet, and my husband's honestly been telling me for years, like literally 4 years, just do it. That's the same thing, just do it. And when the pandemic hit, all of my stationery projects and actually all of my advertising contracts stopped at the same time. And I put all my thinking together and slightly pivoted the business in the sense of expanding my offering to do kind of customer experience work and user experience work in the wedding space, as well as wedding stationery and business branding and things like that. So I essentially actually finally merged my two businesses, but it yielded some amazing results that BizBash, I guess, recognized as being what they were, which was awesome. So I was like beyond thrilled.
How did you go? So previously you weren't in specifically the wedding or events industry. You did web page design, UI design for websites, but not specifically in the wedding and event space, correct?
No, I'm big corporate. So like my background's in like pure like advertising agency. Like,
okay.
Support a TV commercial with a $300,000 microsite. And you're like, okay.
Boring stuff, boring light work, right?
Very interesting. Lots of people. Fascinating space. But I got to a point where I got a little stuck in, okay, like I don't feel like I'm creating anything with purpose for a while. And then my brother I have an obsession with paper, have had it since I was a kid. And my brother was getting married almost 6 years ago. And I was like, I would like to try doing your wedding invitations. And it kind of ballooned from there. I learned to letterpress, foil, laser cut, all on a tabletop press. The laser cut was like a cutter. It was a lot of things that I never knew how to do, but I printed like 1,500 pieces for his wedding. It was a really big Greek wedding, a lot of people. But for like my first project, it kind of like set my kind of creative spark out, and I was like, this is what I'm missing. I needed to work with my hands, and I kind of snowballed from there. I launched the business 6 months later, kind of publicly, as I kind of felt I was ready with a semi-custom line of suites, and then had kept doing the advertising side and always separated them. But yeah, it's been almost 6 years on the stationery side, and a year and a bit with the merger.
So you, if I'm understanding correctly, you've had this incredible background in all the UI design, the websites, all of this corporate stuff, and then you have this kind of creative passion, and you've done which is something I think so many people would love to do, which is marry the two and have this incredible product now that you're able to serve people in your creative space and make a full-time. So are you full-time with this now?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. I really need like 3 people, but it's just me. The pandemic is harming because some of the stuff like production is really challenging because it is so time intensive, and I do outsource some of it, but some of it I'm like, it comes to my house and I have to do all the work for it. And I'm like, I can't have anyone else in my house.
Totally. Let's dive into the details a little bit more of what specifically you do. Because, as I was doing some research, the piece that you add, I think specifically for virtual events, to me is extremely interesting. And, but I think that there's a lot of crossover and a lot of value we can add. I think it was actually interesting. One of our kind of taglines here is from surviving to thriving in the wedding and event
Yeah.
space. And that was actually a tagline that BizBash used when they were talking about the nominees. And so I thought it was really, really cool to see that, because I definitely see that you've done that and you've made, maybe not a complete pivot, but now what you're doing is this amalgamation of what you're truly passionate for, but you're also able to make it a career. So specifically, what do you do now? Is this pure stationery? Like, what do you actually do for the wedding and event space now?
So stationery for consumers.
Okay.
Then I also do branding and like business cards and websites for vendors. And then I also do consumer research um, and web, like for agencies still. So my kind of gamut runs all over there. But on the consumer research piece, that kind of works in both the wedding and kind of corporate setting, but really understanding what your mindset is for the people who use your products, who are coming to your website, why they're coming to your website, why they would be hiring you as a client or as a vendor. Like, what are they looking for? What are their needs? I do like personas and customer journey modeling to individual like uh, some like shop alongs, which is really fascinating, diary studies, but essentially getting in the mind of the people who are buying the things that we're selling and really designing our products around those needs, or pivoting those things to say, you are potentially not marketing yourself in a way that your clients are actually buying you. So if we're like our ideal client, this is a common thing that I find a lot of businesses have is like, my ideal client's age 25 to 35 who makes $100,000 a year and does whatever and likes art. And then when you actually go back and look at all of your existing clients and the clients who are contacting you, a lot of times they're not that. And it's really making sure that you're speaking to those people. Like if you're constantly attracting a different audience, you want to be speaking to those people, because if you're always talking to them this way, you're actually missing out on those opportunities with the clients who may already be there. Like you want to grow that up, and if you want more of those kind of clients, then you want to make sure you're speaking to them. You might need a secondary person you're talking to.
Do you see a lot of small business owners that you work with? Are they trying to kind of redefine the community they serve? Are they trying to get away in some cases from maybe the existing client pool they have, because maybe they want to serve people who are making, some of those metrics that you listed, right? $100,000 per year, but maybe their average person is actually making $50,000 per year. And so they're hiring you to kind of redesign how their brand looks and feels so they attract a higher clientele? Or do you find that the business owners are trying to just dive in deeper with their existing clientele?
More so like targeting a new audience.
Okay.
But then I also work on the strategy side to make sure that they're talking to the right people to begin with. Some people don't even know who their ideal clients are and who they should be talking to and how to market them. Like, I mean, as a small business, we have a million things going on. Like there's always, like, marketing is such a different world. And I mean, I struggle with it in my own business, ironically, but I work literally every day in this space. Like it drives me crazy. It's like the irony is my website, I have like one in the works. It's been in the works for like a year. Um, but I do so much for my other clients that I just don't have any time to do it on myself. And that's the thing that we all struggle with. So partnering with someone like me allows, I find allows a business to take some of that kind of like bias and objectification away, because I'm literally like looking at who are you talking to? What are they currently saying? Let's look at your past 10 weddings. What did that actually mean for you? Are they portfolio worthy? Are they the kind of clients you want there? What are nuggets you can take out of that to apply to the kind of clients you want to be talking to in the future? A lot of times I talk to people and they're like, who is your ideal client? And they're like, I literally don't know. Like, I'm word of mouth and my clients just keep coming to me. And so then I'm like, okay, so is that the kind of people you want to be working with? And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no. And then we're like, okay, so who do you want to be talking to? So there's a lot of conversations there that I find I love it, because it allows a business to really kind of dig into things that they may not know enough about, but it's also getting them excited about talking to people again in different ways, because you're not just selling them on, if you're a florist, what can I do as a florist? It's really about like, what what does this event mean in my client's life? And how can I, as a florist, impact that? Like,
Mm.
how can we have those conversations?
Why do you think business owners often miss the mark? And I think it's really funny what you said. It's kind of this classic paradox of, the video team has a site that doesn't have any great videos on it, but they create all this beauty for
Yes.
their clients, of course, but then their site's not that great. But so why do you think that business owners are missing the mark here, even on something that they may be in the industry on?
It's hard to know. Like, so one thing is, we're not our clients.
Mhm.
As much as we'd like to think like we design for them, we always design for ourselves through a lens of who we think we're designing for. And that's where the research side, and even just having conversations with your clients, is really understanding their needs. You can never understand a first time bride. Like, you may have had that experience once, but once you have 50, 60, 100 events under your belt, you're no longer in that mindset. You're in, I need to make this much profit. I need to pay for my team. I need to cover these things. I want to go on vacation. I'm tired. Like, there's so many other factors that are going in there, and you're not necessarily in the headspace of thinking through, what does this kind of client need? It even applies to some of our corporate clients, where they're on a very different mindset of, so my first thing, but it's the luncheon, it's my annual conference. I know it's different now, but now it's all virtual. Like, how do I make this engaging?
Mhm.
Like, those kind of things, we're not in that headspace. We're in a very different mind state. So getting into that takes a bit of work and a lot of practice. I mean, when I started out doing research, what I thought was the right way wasn't, because I placed a lot of my bias and behavior in there. And you really have to find ways of stripping yourself out of those conversations and not leading conversations to get the results you want. There's some really interesting nuances that it comes with research about asking. I know we're covering a lot of topics here,
No, it's
but
perfect.
asking leading questions. So a lot of the times, the kind of question of, does this shirt make me look fat? That's a leading question, because you're essentially asking someone to validate your question. But rather than, what do you think of my shirt, is an open-ended question, because you're not asking them for a specific result. You're opening yourself up for potentially negative feedback or positive feedback. So you have to be ready to accept that. But it essentially allows that freedom to the person to kind of step in, and then you can see where opportunity lies, rather than, do you think my website is awesome? No or yes doesn't really give you good guidance. It's, I would like your opinion on my website. I'm updating imagery. I need to know what kind of imagery is resonating with you. That is a really interesting opening for someone to give you feedback in.
Jordan, I love that you do this, because I feel like, you talked about removing your own bias. I think as business owners, as a business owner myself, it's my baby, right? Like, I have
Sure.
all the bias in the world. And so I'm here and I'm like, it can do no wrong, kind of. Or maybe on the complete flip side, this is terrible. This is trash. I hate this. We need to fix everything. You kind of come in as this, unbiased third party kind of objective viewer to, like, no, actually, these things are working. These things aren't working. This is what we should do moving forward. Have you felt, where are you located?
I'm in Toronto.
Okay, so you're in Canada.
Mhm.
There, I think, are a lot of similarities between Canada and certain parts of the US as far as
Yes.
lockdowns, but certainly massive differences. And I think that's the same actually in the US, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Huge, huge polar opposites,
Literally
100%
a state
capacity.
over, complete lockdown, like the pandemic never happened.
Exactly. Full capacity at Rangers Stadium in Texas, and here in California, we may be getting back to normal in
Yeah.
June, like June, mid-June, something like that. Have you seen a big difference in the type of voice or the type of approach that you've had to take with your clients as you're dealing with them in different places throughout the world?
Yeah, it definitely weighs in, because there's a lot of different nuances that are happening in the way that you have to market yourself in those audiences, and those markets. So there's a lot of different things. So, like, when it comes to weddings that I'm working on, there's full steam ahead events, and then there are ones that are like, let's just hold off, because we're not really sure if we're ready to go to print yet, because we don't know if we're postponing, even though it's in the summer.
Yeah.
And we don't know our final guest count, so we don't know how much to actually print. So there's lots of nuances in those conversations. All of my Toronto clients are on hold, but I have clients in New York and San Francisco and all those, and those are all over the map.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different conversations about what that market needs. But even when you're advertising outside of the world of that, it is very market specific in how you position yourself and what those needs are, especially as you look at if you service a local market or a regional market or a national or international market, the way that you position your products and services definitely changes because you need to be able to speak the language of flexibility and travel and accommodation and different ways to comfort your clients, especially them knowing you may not be physically in the same space as them.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of stuff that happens. Sorry.
I think it's also interesting that even though so many people are doing things virtually, there still is a lot of movement. So your client in New York may also, their client might be coming from Texas or
Yeah.
Florida, right up the coast, right? So they have a lot to think about as well. Working with a vendor like yourself, who's able to kind of put those pieces together for them really means a lot from an unbiased standpoint. Um, that's huge. I totally love that. I want to go back and kind of drill into specifically what you do, because I think we're gonna have a lot of pros listening to this who want to understand what you do and how what you do or how what they can learn from you will actually help level up their own businesses. Um, Give me very practically, a client comes in, I hire you. What do I do? How do you bring value to my event and make it better?
So there's two ways I would usually work with people from an event perspective. One is hiring me for stationery, which is a very literal kind of behavior. So invitations, menus, programs, all those kind of things. But I like to think of it through a kind of a customer journey lens. So like, what's the guest experience look like? And mapping all the pieces out that we're working on, and even pieces that I'm not working on, um, to make sure that it's enhancing the guest experience. So if you guys are doing a custom drink wall, what can we include that would be branded in that sense? So are there vinyl decals that we're going to design? Are there unique ways that we can handle that that drink? I've done some really cool branded, like custom vinyl stickers that created personalized cans. So like we've had those conversations where a lot of time vendors are like, we want to do something interesting, but we don't know what yet. And then I can work with their vendor team to say, hey, this is some really cool ways we can do it. And here I can create the design for it. And then your vinyl printer who's local can go and print it. So there are many different ways that we work in there. Then there is the other element where I work a little bit more on the consultation side, where it is there to help you find gaps in an event that can get enhanced outside of the world of stationery and event branding. So I can just kind of like see opportunities that may be enhanced. So you essentially come in as like a consultant, a couple hours, just really understanding the gist of the event. And then I can identify where there may be some gaps in just in my experience and where you might want to, like, have you considered, you know, this kind of element from a design standpoint? So I can help on that side. The third way outside of events is consulting in your business, which we've touched on a little bit, but you know, where you're looking for kind of any customer data, customer modeling, I can help with that stuff. But then it's also your website, your logo, your branding. I do brand audits a lot of the time just to make sure that you're putting yourself out there in a way that makes a lot of sense to your audience and to yourself. Because a
Mhm.
lot of times, again, we get stuck.
Jordan, I'm hearing huge cross applicability from like this client journey idea and taking the client through this beautiful experience where from the invitation all the way through to the actual experience, whether that experience is in person or virtually, because there's this whole new world of
Oh
like
yeah.
making it interesting. And we're going to get to that here in a second because I have questions for you. But I think from a business standpoint, really, it's the journey that your clients have with you. It's, you know, how you're taking them through the experience of the first touch points, onboarding them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there's so many opportunities within there. So I do work with brands, and this is what I do on my corporate side as well, is really understanding the full consumer journey for our clients. And as you kind of alluded to, Jonathan, it's what happens when they start to, when they come to your website, how are they finding out about you? And then when they inquire, what does that look like? Is it email? Is it meetings? Is it follow-ups? What does the follow-up look like? How does that get handled? What do the contracts look like? What does the invoicing look like? There's all these different touch points to think through to make sure that we're streamlining the experience for our guests and our consumers of our products so that they have the most optimal experience. There's a lot of times where, I mean, I know from my business, I use, depending on the market I am servicing, I have like 3 or 4 different systems I have to use. Because if I'm invoicing in Canadian dollars or US dollars, I have to use different systems. So that interface is different. That invoice is different. If I'm doing a client who is on retainer, it is a different system that does automated invoicing because some of them are just different. It's just the way that I've set up my business. So making sure that all of those feel consistent for our clients so that they're not confused as to what they're getting, if they want to know how to, ask questions, also know what to expect. What do timelines look like? Uh, I was a project manager for a period of time. So there's a lot of conversations that people have around how long does this take? What is the next step? When are we talking next? And what I look through in those kind of typical customer journey models is like, how often are you communicating with your clients? Is it enough? Is it too much? Are they getting all the details they need? And is there opportunities in there that, are you sending them is there a surprise and delight you can include in there that doesn't impact your bottom line, but gives your clients a bit of an experience they weren't expecting?
Totally.
It could be a piece of mail, it could be an email, it could be a $5 Starbucks card, just as like a thank you and can't wait to see you at our next coffee date. Like any of those things can make a huge impact in your client's kind of journey, especially because a lot of our clients are working with us for 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. Like there's a lot of touch points that are kind of, we get busy. Things
Mhm.
happen.
Do you
And
do you think when you provide a better, just as a vendor, do you think
yeah,
when you provide a better experience for your clients, you're actually able to charge more because they feel more
oh yeah,
catered to?
yeah. There's a level of like white glove service. So it's how I work in my stationery is like I want to make sure that my clients have to do the least amount of work as possible that costs more money, um, because it's more labor on our end, but it gives them a sense of I'm being trusted by experts. It would be like hiring someone to, I don't know, do your grocery shopping, and then if you have to micromanage all of it, I wouldn't expect to pay the same as someone if I'm like, please go buy me apples, and they bring me the best apples, and I don't have to worry about it. I'd expect I'd have to pay a little bit more for that because I'm putting the trust on that business. And
Mhm.
that's what our clients are doing a lot of the time. So they should be expecting to pay a little bit more for that. And it's set up in the way that you talk to your clients about that is why we're more expensive is because of the way that we handle your business.
I love that, Jordan. There's such a interesting conversation happening right now about pricing in the industry. And I think there are a lot of clients that come through when they're either considering getting married or having an event or something like that, that they're actually shocked how much it costs. And I see all these vendors saying, giving kind of these like horror stories about, oh my gosh, they wanted a $5,000 wedding and they expect us to be professional for that much. Well, I think that's not so shocking when you consider that a lot of times the professionals don't do the education and the client onboarding needed to actually show them that there's this gap. Like you could have your cousin
Yeah,
freehand your stuff and
sure,
maybe it could be good.
it might be good.
Yeah,
It might not be on time. There might be spelling mistakes. There might be like little things. You never know.
crooked.
Yeah, like there's a lot of different things that happen there when you kind of do a backyard wedding, so to speak, where it is family and friends helping and contributing. That's all great, but they may not realize that there are certain legal implications. Like for us, you have to have a ordained minister. It can't be your best friend to do it to officiate your wedding. Someone has to be an officiant to do it here. Like in Ontario, it's legally they have to be approved by the like. You have to have someone else there to officiate. You can have someone read something and mock the ceremony, but someone has to physically say the part that's an officiant. So as much as someone's like, oh, I want to save that money, you're not necessarily going to save the money if you're not legally married here. Like there are things that they don't know. And that's our place to have those conversations to educate our clients what that actually means and why it matters. They can choose to only invest for that $5,000 wedding overall, but they have to realize the sacrifice and limitations they're going to have in there. And they only do that after they've talked to enough people to realize that. And I mean, some clients are super stubborn and are like, well, you're too expensive, so I'm going to go find someone else. And someone will likely fill a gap. There's always someone who's willing to do it, but I think it's on us as a business to say, you know, this is my line that I'm not willing to cross, and this is the line I am.
Do you think the middle is clearing out? Meaning, do you think we're getting this separation of the vendors and of course the clients that are willing to pay top dollar to get a premium experience, whether it's virtual or in person, and really do the job? I don't even want to say right, but maybe professionally. And then the clients that are going to do it on a budget, they want to get married. It's only worth $5,000 to them because they really do want to invest in a down payment on a home or whatever. And so the middle is kind of clearing out. So as a vendor hearing that, you're like, I need to be either pushing myself to be the best, or I need to consciously talk about volume because I know I'm going to be charging less.
Yeah, I think that I'm seeing it, but I also know that there are businesses who are not charging what I think they should be charging, but are doing well. So I think that if you just kind of carve the lane that you want to be in and you're comfortable there, I think that's what makes the most sense. I don't ever imagine that there's going to be like $15,000 wedding planner plus percentage and $2,000 wedding planner. There's always going to be a medium. But I think that we just have to understand where we want to be and what our overall trajectory is. Like, I mean, ultimately, some of us want to be doing 5 events a year. So obviously we need to be compensated for that. But some people love having that volume. It's just, you know, as you kind of were saying, you have to decide where you want to be. And if you're comfortable doing, like I have a florist that I work with often who has like 150, she had like pre-pandemic, like 200 some odd events a year, but
Wow.
she has a team who can do those things, but that's where she wants to be. That's what she likes to do. So that's where she's comfortable. So it just depends on what they want to be accomplishing and what their goals are for their business. I mean, if you're like a sole proprietor, you have to realize there's only so much you can handle. And you
Totally.
want to make sure that I'm not going to be like, sure, I can do 50 events a year and that's one a weekend. Like, do I really want to work every weekend? You can ask yourself that question. If you do and you can handle it, great. But how long can you sustain that?
Mhm.
At some point, you're going to be like, maybe I should do 25 or 30 or whatever you want to be comfortable with. And then you have to accommodate your pricing there. I think it also comes down to client wise, what they're willing to invest is really about what level of service you're going to be producing. So if you are going to be a little bit more expensive, you don't want to be positioning yourself as a volume producer. You don't want to be showing the kind of events that are what a volume producer is doing, because that's the kind of client you're going to be attracting.
Mm. This is huge. You know, I actually spoke with Megan Ely in season 1 of our podcast about how, you know, oftentimes pros will put out information, whether it's copy, whether it's pictures. They give an example of an audience or what a sample audience would look like or a sample client would look like. And then they attract more of those people. And it's like, I didn't want that. And it's like, that's the only thing that you're showing. And I think that's what you're alluding to a little bit,
Yeah,
correct?
there was the naked cake trend for a long time, and I know a number of my cake friends were like, I'm done. Like, this is not a creative challenge for me anymore. And I'm like, so stop posting it.
Yeah.
Like I get why, but the more you show people, the more they want. So if all you do is post blush and white weddings and you hate them, don't post it. Over time, like phase it out and start showing the things you want to be doing, because then you're going to be known for those other things. But if all you do is post barn weddings as a photographer, your clients are only going to see you that way because they don't know you do anything else. And if all you market is that, then that's the case.
Do you think as pros, as wedding pros, because what we do is so style driven and so aesthetic, like that's, you know, the pictures, the video that'll come from it, everything is driven to be beautiful and to fit a certain person's style. Do you think that we kind of unnecessarily obsess over one specific category rather than opening ourselves up to beauty in different forms?
Yes. I think that there's there's a bit of like FOMO that happens, I feel like, in our industry when if someone pampas grass is still big. But as a florist, if I'm like, I need to have that in my portfolio because I think my clients are going to ask for that because that's what, brides is showing and that's what the nod is showing frequently. And so clients are asking for that, but I don't have it, so they're not going to know. So I feel like there's a bit of that level. I think for me, it's really about where do I want to be? And if I want to have that in my portfolio, then I go and create that or I go and have an event like that. But I think it also comes down to, is that going to be what is going to service me and my clients in the long run? Like, do I want to be doing those kinds of designs? No, then don't do it. Don't chase that trend because there's going to be a new one in 6 months. um, like there are ways you can accommodate those things. And I think that, I don't know, I think the pandemic has taught me a lot about like that sense of FOMO that I had prior. I've kind of learned to not necessarily factor that in anymore because it's really about like what is important to me and what is important to my business and what is important to the kind of work that I want to be doing. And if that isn't pampas grass or a naked cake or any of those kind of things, then so be it. Like then I don't do that anymore. And when someone inquires, I mean, I'm of the mindset of turning work away that isn't a fit or do the work and don't post it. Like I know it's a bit of that. Like if I need to fill my time and I don't have any events, an event comes up that isn't the right fit per se, just don't post it. It doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Mhm.
Like there are ways you can do that.
There is totally a different type of FOMO, I think, that happens when, as a wedding professional, you turn away business because it's not the type of business that you want to be doing, yet you think it's the type of business, or it's just business at all. And so you need it. And, in some parts of the country, of course, things are roaring back to life. I think we're going to see that steadily as different, counties, cities open up. Countries, as people are vaccinated, as different things are starting to happen, we're going to see that. But at the same time, all business, just because you haven't had business for a while, all business is not the type of business that you want. And it does take some bravery to say like, no. And simultaneously, then you have to focus on the type of
Yeah.
business that you do want.
Yeah. I mean, it is really scary, especially if it's quite a bit of money
Uh-huh.
where you're like, do I, don't I? Like that mentality happens all the time, but you have to take a look at, you know, if it's just I need to pay some bills, do the job. That if it's not going to be a sacrifice to you creatively and emotionally, like if it's going to be a nightmare client, don't take it regardless. Like that's just my personal opinion based on experience. But I know at the beginning of my career, it was like I just I need to be able to do so many events a year to say that I've made it. Like you be frank, you've never made it. Like I
So
just
true.
in my thing, like I'm not Mindy Weiss. Like I'm not like I'm not a giant well-known brand. Like it's not. I don't know. I mean, it's never gonna to be like. I mean, I was at Wedding MBA a couple of years ago as a vendor, like I had a booth, and some of the vendors walked up to me and I was like, "Oh my god, I follow you on Instagram," and I was like, "What?" Like it was like the most random. Like someone who was in California was following me, and I was like, "I don't even know how you found, but cool." Like it was amazing to hear, and it was like, "Oh, that was so cool." But I'm also like, I don't know. You have no idea who is following you, who's heard of you, any of those things. So I'm always of the mindset of I'm trying to push myself as a creative,
Mhm.
and I'm never like I'm always going to be iterating, and that's kind of like I'm always going to be evolving. So
Mhm.
my business will never be, I'm never going to rest on my laurels because that's who I am as a business and as a creator is that that kind of that drive is something that's always in me. So,
Mhm.
I mean, that's what I want to make sure my clients feel that as well.
Jordan, let's shift a little bit. I think you've provided incredible value just kind of as you've been talking. But I know that there are pros out there that are going to be thinking they want to level up their business. Maybe they need to redefine who their clients are. Maybe they need to do some of this work and they know it. They know it deep down, but they haven't yet done it, or they haven't hired someone like yourself. So, from a and I will put a caveat. I do actually think that the only way to really do a great job in this is hiring someone outside, or even if it's not hiring someone, just having someone from the outside take a look, because we are very subjective as we look at our own thing. But with that said, are there some first steps that business owners can do to kind of make a practical difference in how they create a user experience for their clients that actually increases their revenue, their impact, the way they serve?
So first thing I usually is even what I ask my clients is to do a bit of an audit of their existing process. A lot of times we don't actually think of it end to end. Like what does the whole year and a half long engagement look like? So I mean, even as a business, you can do this yourself. It's just a conversation of, okay, so what happens when someone's going from my website to an inquiry? What's the email they receive? What's the touch point there? Like all those kind of elements I touched on, you can do on your own
Would
because
you
you
write,
can, yeah,
sorry for interrupting, would you write this down? Is this just a conversation to have with someone else?
I write it down
Okay.
because writing it down definitely helps you see it linearly. And then you can start to have conversations. If you're going to talk to another vendor friend, they're awesome at bouncing things around. If you're like, those conversations are really good for specific things because they're not going to necessarily be able to get in the whole mindset.
Mhm.
But if you're like identifying certain gaps that you're seeing in there to say, hey, I'm not doing this, but maybe I should, or I'm hearing that other people are doing it this way, or I've always wanted a digital proposal tool. Now's the time to look at it because you saw in your process that that is the gap. And if you're doing a different proposal every time you're quoting someone, maybe you should look at streamlining that and get a little bit of time by writing that down and seeing that that can help identify those things for you.
Got it. At what point would you recommend someone brings in like, I guess what I'm asking is when's the best time to bring in someone like yourself? Like at what point can you have the best, most powerful conversation with a business owner to actually help them with this journey?
Usually at the beginning.
Okay.
And that is because a lot of times, um, as a business, once we start investing time and money, like out, so if you hadn't hired me, but you did a bit of work and you started with some logos, and then you're thinking about updating your website and you're looking at templates, but you're looking in 7 or 8 different spaces, that's time and money you're investing. So you start to become invested in those platforms. And then if you bring in someone as a consultant to start looking at those things holistically, you can get attached to those things and then you're locked in. Like if you've already signed up for some of those demos or any of those things, you've essentially committed to some of those platforms. Or if you've done a logo redesign and then you've decided that you're changing your ideal client, that could be an impact because your logo might not be speaking to that new ideal client you want to be moving towards in the next, 12 to 24 months. Like those are things you want to be thinking through in those conversations. Um, and I say at the beginning just so that we can have those conversations. I may not be involved at the beginning,
Hmm.
but it's just worthy of having those conversations. That hey, I think there's opportunity here for you to go off and research the best website platform if you're going to be hosting on your own. Here's some of the ones that I recommend. Now you go do the research and see which works in your price point. Here's what works from an SEO perspective. Here's what works from a XYZ perspective. Those are things that I can kind of recommend, and I usually do a lot of for my clients, um, in just those conversations because I want, like for me, it's really important that people are set up for success even if they don't hire me. And
Hmm.
it's like it's it's the antithesis of what most businesses do, I find. But for me, it's really important that people feel like they're set up for that success and they're comfortable. Um, so have those conversations early, and then we can talk about what the next steps are. When it comes to identifying things from an event perspective, that kind of comes into different plays. I mean, ultimately, again, the earlier the better because I can help make sure that you're budgeting the right things. Because a lot of times people come in on the stationary side to say, well, I've allocated $1,500 for all the day of elements, but we want a custom wall and bar menus and a vinyl dance floor graphic and foil menus and personalized calligraphy escort. And I'm like, well, okay, well, you're at 6 grand there. And they're like, how do we work backwards? Because you've committed your client in a mindset of this look and feel, but your budget doesn't allow that. So then
Hmm.
there becomes conversations pretty quickly as to what can we do feasibly within your budget, and how can we pivot the conversation with your client to say, we allocated this much, this is what we can do here, and this is what we're going to have to start sacrificing. Or if you're willing to invest more, here's what you can do.
I'm hearing immediate advantages for someone who does a wedding package or someone who is at an all-inclusive type venue. If they've sold their client on a $30,000, wedding experience, but then they have constantly been putting out pictures of all this elaborate stuff, they haven't properly allocated the correct budget within that. And so they end up either needing to cut corners in different ways, which will end up resulting in bad reviews and poor word of mouth referral. Or, if you are a blank canvas coordinator or something like that, really doing a correct job of making sure that a package you have, a planning package, allows you to start early enough.
Yes. Yeah, I
Huh.
mean, it's making sure, even if you're like, I've worked with a number of venues to consult on their packages, and if there's stationery included in it, just to say, if they're like, we allocate $500. Okay, so then I'm like, logistically, you can get this for $500, and make sure that's included in there, and then let them know that there are options above that, or if that's it. I know destination is always a little bit harder because of mailing and all those things. So usually with those, it's fairly simple and straightforward, because some of those clients are happy just to get whatever's out of the box. But it's just being realistic and setting that stage for the client to make sure they understand what they're getting in that package from a detailed breakdown perspective.
Do you spend any time looking into, or have you like done any research on NLP?
A bit, yeah. My dad's been trying to get me interested in it.
But I can't help but thinking, like, the whole neuralistic programming, like understanding experience, how human behavior changes. I think specifically on the side of the client facing, client to consumer, if they're your client and they're a professional, wedding professional, how they're kind of designing everything. I know the immediate thing that comes to mind is like Abercrombie and Fitch, or casinos where they're putting oxygen in, or they're Abercrombie just with the sprays, the scents, the vibe. I think that's very much what you're doing in a digital sense, or in a very practical sense, when people are interfacing with a brand, or a client is interfacing with their wedding, their guests, all of that. That's super, super powerful. Jordan, this is so cool. So when people want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you? Because I think that's the next step. Like, if I'm a pro and I'm listening to this here, I'm like, I got to call this guy right away. I have to figure this out, because really there is an opportunity cost to trying to do it on your own. And I think you can do so much on your own. And I think it does matter who you are too. Like, if it's you could probably do some of this for yourself. But if you have other skills in other areas, it makes sense to hire pros just like you to help level up your business. So how do people get a hold of you?
My website is the best one, agooddayinc.com. It's INC. And then Instagram is probably the best on social for getting in touch with me, and that's A Good Day Inc. as well.
Okay. Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I mean, I actually would really love to do a follow-up at some point. And just as your business continues to expand, I know I don't even think that we had enough time to talk about the digital side of things. And I'd really love to dive into that, because I think hybrid events, in fact, really quick, I'm curious, do you see hybrid events lasting longer than during this period of time where it's, out of necessity?
I, I don't think it's going to be necessity. I think it's going to be a value add to clients. Um, More so, I feel like hybrid events are going to be more popular on the corporate side than the social side, because there's only so much, and client budgets are very different on the social side. Like, a live stream for a wedding is quite different than a basic videographer. Like, there's a very different level of involvement, multi-cameras potentially, there's constant internet connection, there's also a platform to stream against. Like, there's a lot of different factors that go in there. But corporate, I feel like it's actually going to open a lot of doors. Like, for me, logistically, I hope conferences go hybrid for the future, because it allows me to go to a conference without actually being there sometimes, when I might have an event that weekend, or I'm not able to travel necessarily, or like it opens up the doors to a lot of conversations. There is value of going in person, but I'm hoping that these kind of things stay moving forward. Like, I've honestly moved all of my consultations to virtual, because it allows me to work with my clients a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trying to coordinate and making sure that we're both, you know, COVID tested and clean, and like we're trying to go to a mutual space because I don't have consults in my house.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of different factors that have to go in there. And if I can have a virtual consult, like those are the things that I hope are going to stay moving forward, because it allows our clients to be met in ways that are in their space and their level of comfort and their time. Um,
I think selfishly on both ends, it is a very interesting conversation because it helps. There could be someone who's just radically creative and has so much value to add to an industry or to a discipline, but because they are not really interested in taking on the overhead of an office space or all of these other things that go with actually having a design studio, they may be not, really doing that. And now they can do it right out of their home with some simple equipment. They
Yep.
can set it up, and it really allows so much more beauty and value to be added into the world, in a much lighter touch way, rather than it's a small hinge that swings a big door.
Oh yeah.
So cool. Well, Jordan, thank you. I really appreciate you being here. And I know everyone's going to love this. I cannot wait for it to be released. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again at some point as well. So thank you so
Awesome.
much for
I
being on
love
the
that.
show.
Thank you so much for having me.